Recording in progress.
Okay, welcome everybody. I am just getting this started here. Okay, if you can't hear me or see me, just let me know. We're gonna be switching between my face camera and the down view camera, the overhead camera. So welcome. If you're watching the recording or if you're here live, my name's Cheyenne. I am a calligrapher. I was previously a school teacher. I left full-time teaching when my first son was born and stayed home. And that's where this was born. I started as a hobby, my calligraphy, and then it turned into a business. And now I've kind of found a way to mesh both the education world and the calligraphy world. And so I'm excited to be launching a course on Cursive, especially for those that are teaching either their grandkids or their kids, or whoever it may be. So I'm excited to share with you all that I know about Cursive. I'm going to switch then over here to, let's see if I can switch. Okay, I'm on my own today, so I'm clicking all the buttons by myself. Inside. If you were on the email list, you received this set of downloads, so you're welcome to follow along with us. And it's just connecting over here to the sound. Give me just a second. Okay, I think you should still be able to hear me and see that. Okay, let me move this. There won't be any shadows. All right, here we go. Just go ahead and drop anything in the chat if you have questions or if you have can't hear me or anything like that. Feel free to just let me know. Okay, so while we're waiting for everyone to join, I'm just going to show you some of our cursive modern cursive handwriting books. These are some of the most popular on the market right now. This, I won't name the curriculum, but if you are like in the homeschool scene or the teaching scene, you're probably aware of it. So this is what a really popular workbook looks like today. I'm just kind of going to give you a glimpse. Here is another really popular one. The letters are ginormous. It's actually really hard to write that large. So a little more like slanted, pretty look, but very large writing. And then this is the Palmer method. It's what they taught 100 years ago. Let me find a page that has, you can see all of it. And there's actually no tracing. So you'll see this is all tracing. This is tracing. This is going to be done by visually studying the letters and learning the strokes. So very different there, right? This is what my course will be based on, is the Palmer method. I'll be using the same principles and the same letter forms that they taught during the Palmer method. So A.N. Palmer is the one that came up with this theory, the Palmer method. There's a lot of others during the time. There's like names like Mary Champion and Bairnsmeyer. And essentially they just coined the term cursive to refer to this type of script penmanship. So now we call it cursive. Your grandparents or parents maybe even called it the Palmer method. But when I am teaching, this is what I will be referring to is the Palmer method. And then I just wanted to show you some of those samples of how it is alike and different. So if you have the download, you're welcome to follow along. Or if you're watching the replay or want to watch this, you know, as many times as you can, feel free to print them out and keep using them. So to get started, I just want you to grab a pencil. And before we're even going to start, I'm going to give you just a little spiel on writing utensils. Go here. I when I'm teaching, I'm going to recommend a sharpened pencil. That's really all you need, but you need one that will stay sharp. So a little higher quality pencil is going to go a long ways because it stays sharp longer. The ballpoint pens are nice, but you don't want one that is too um, that it's too wide. So this one's like really juicy. And you can see if I start writing like the letter E or even the letter A, if it's smaller, it's going to fill in those ovals right here if it's too juicy of a pen. So I always recommend starting with a sharpened pencil or a mechanical pencil if you're like well versed in using mechanical pencils. For young students like 7, 8, 9 years old, I won't start them on a mechanical pencil because they're very heavy handed and the lead will just break over and over. But as you start to transition, that helps you develop a lighter hand. So for adults or teens who have used mechanical pencils, that's a good option. Otherwise, just a sharp pencil works great. Okay, and then as far as pencil grip, so in my cursive curriculum, I've sourced this fun pencil that will force you to have the proper grip. So unfortunately, I have been holding my pencil like this for about 30 years now, which is not the proper grip. I can create really beautiful letters with it, but my hand gets really, really tired. And so my fingers are gripping it so hard that I can't write very long. And so that's the reason. I mean, you could create really pretty letters like this, but the proper grip is going to be the tripod grip, and that's the one that I would encourage you to use. So if you are brand new to cursive, or if you've been doing it for a lot of years, try the tripod grip. That's going to be your thumb, your index finger, and then resting on your middle finger. So this will be part of the curriculum if you purchase the physical set to help you create that tripod grip. So that's something to focus on that can help you also glide along the paper more smoothly, because if you're holding it upright like this, you're really pushing in hard, kind of have that death grip on it. So this is going to help you move along the paper more smoothly. Okay, and then paper position. These are just a couple things that will immediately help your handwriting. So paper position, this blotter mat, this desk mat is sitting just straight. Let's see if you can see the edge of it. Okay, so this is straight towards my body, the edge of the table. And then when I set my paper down, it's going to be at an angle. So essentially the corner here is going to point towards my heart. And that's going to give you the slanted line, like you will find the natural slant, like you will see in these letters. So you want to write at an angle to create this style. And then let's see, so pencil, paper, we could talk a lot about posture, but we will move on to guidelines. And before I actually do guidelines, if you're following along on this first page, right here by number 1, I just want you to write, this is my best cursive. So really quick, I'm not going to do anything fancy because I don't want you to try and copy mine, but just go ahead and write, this is my best cursive. And then we'll come back to this page. You can take notes on it too if you'd like, or however. Okay, while you're working on that, behind your printouts, you have some guidelines. On the bottom here, it will tell you what it is. We've got a 1/4 inch ruled lines, a 1/4 inch grid sheet, another 1/4 inch guide sheet, an 1/8 inch guide sheet, and a 1/4 inch ruled lines. You'll see some of them have slant lines and looks kind of confusing. Some of them will not have the slant lines. So our goal is to move from something like this, where we have all of these, they're kind of like crutches. We call them, these are our slant lines. These are all of our guidelines. So the course will take you from moving from this type of guide sheet to where you are just writing on standard lined paper. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit about guide sheets as we get going. So the first one we're going to do is this warm-up page, and we have push and pulls. I haven't warmed up at all today, so before I do any handwriting exercises, and this will be part of the curriculum also, that I would encourage you to do is warm ups. And it might seem silly, but it really gets your arm flowing, and your fingers and your wrist ready to go. So the first one is push pulls. I'm just going to use my pencil. And I'm going to follow this slant line, and I'm just going to pull down and push up, pull down and push up. And you just want to follow the slant line as close as you can. You don't want to go so slow that it's perfect, because cursive isn't necessarily meant to be slow, but you're kind of following a rhythm, just feeling that up and down movement. The up's always harder for me than the down. So you can do a couple of those, a couple lines of those. Those are called push pulls. And that is what will help your letters be consistently slanted the same angle as you begin your handwriting. Okay, and then we can try some ovals. So this slant line is at a 52-degree angle, and in cursive and calligraphy, I know some of you are here from calligraphy, a lot of the letters are made up of ovals, or you can kind of find an oval shape within them, and that's what makes them look so consistent. So if our ovals are consistent, our letters are going to be consistent. And this is where that tripod grip really comes in handy, because I'm using the tripod and I'm resting it on the pinky finger so that my hand just glides right along the page. And that's important to note also, that we're not doing like finger movement like this. We're doing whole arm movement. Okay, so the slant line kind of bisects that center of the oval, and then you can just move your arm along the page. And I notice here that my arm is starting to stretch. I'm using my fingers more. So another thing that I've learned that is not taught in today's cursive that really makes a huge difference is to move your paper. I know we talk a lot about never picking up your pencil, but almost more important than never picking up your pencil is to move your paper, because we have an optimal writing zone. So I'll show you. If I kept my paper here in this exact spot the whole time, I can make my ovals. But then as I get further, I start reaching and they start becoming less consistent. Now, if I were to make my ovals and go maybe 4 or so inches and then slide my paper, I can continue to make those consistent ovals. So sliding your paper is really key to getting consistency. Okay, and then a reverse oval is just going to be going in the opposite motion. Some letters will use the opposite oval. And these are just warm-up drills. Don't stress too much about perfection. It's just to get your arm moving and practice moving the paper, shifting it just enough so that you stay right here in your optimal zone. Okay, so you had the push pulls, the ovals, and the reverse ovals. Okay, and then another drill that you can do to create more consistent cursive is called cross drills. And so what you're going to do here is practice moving your arm across the page. The first shape that I'm going to have you do would be the letter I. So I is going to curve up and down. It's just a consistent curve. But we're going to make a running line. So I'm going to do a whole bunch of I's across the page. And I can use this grid sheet to help me practice the consistency. So here we go. Let's see. I might use a different color just so you guys can see it a little better on the camera. Let's see. Yeah, I think that blue shows up a little nicer for you. So I am just using my grid sheet here. I can see I need to shift the paper, trying to create a consistent running I. And then that's the letter I. You could go back and dot it if you wanted to. We could do the letter U where it is just two of the same strokes. So up, down, up, down, up. I'm going to do a line of U's. And this is going to help you develop the rhythm to create consistent spacing and sizing. Okay, I'm going to do this kind of quicker. You don't have to work too quick, but I want to show you what it will look like if you do a couple lines. I don't know if you can hear that sound, but it's really relaxing to me. Okay, and then you can turn your page. So I've gone this way, and then I'm going to go horizontal, and I can do the same thing. And it's going to show you consistency in your letters or inconsistency. So I'm doing this exact same movement all across the page. And I am going to grab this blank sheet so you can see it a little bit better. And then, oops, I would turn it. And you can see the shapes that it made if you are being consistent or not. And you can do this with every letter that you learn in cursive. So I could even do the letter, let me grab another blank one. It shows up a little better for you. Like if I wanted to do letter A, I could do a chain of A's. And then turn it and do the same thing. It seems kind of monotonous, but it really does help you develop muscle memory and spacing and consistency. So you can see that by going both directions, I can kind of look and see where my consistencies and inconsistencies are. And you can do that with every letter. That is called a cross drill. So we won't spend more time on that, but that's something you can do every single day to improve your handwriting. You can do just this movement, this basic movement that will help. And then you can do the individual letters. You'll do it one direction and then turn it and do it the opposite direction. Okay, again, feel free if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just keep moving along. Okay, we have talked about pencil grip. So I'm going to do just a little review. Pencil grip, we've got the tripod grip so that you are not as fatigued and that you can move your hand smoothly across the page. Your paper position, rather than upright like this, we want to be where these slant lines are pointing right towards our heart, or the corner of the page is kind of right towards the center of our body. If you're left-handed, I should mention, I didn't ask out there if anyone was left-handed, but if you're left-handed, it's just a mirror reverse. So rather than like this, you would turn it like this, and then your left hand would follow the slant line. My third grader that I'm going to be teaching cursive to is left-handed, so I am going to be working through all of those struggles this coming year. But it's just a mirror flip here if you're left-handed. Okay, so we've got pencil grip, we've got paper position, we've got using the guidelines, following the slants. We've talked about moving our paper, kind of if we set our hands down. This is our optimal writing position. So rather than moving our paper or our pencil clear to the end, let's move our paper to meet our pencil so that we're always right here in this optimal position. And then your warm-ups and your cross drills. So if you're just joining us or catching the replay, these are something that we'll do every single day: the push pulls, the ovals, reverse ovals, and cross drills to create muscle memory and consistency in our cursive handwriting. Okay, we're going to take a little break back to our first page. Now that your hand is warmed up, we're going to write the sentence again. This is my best cursive. And maybe you can feel that after warming up and doing some of those drills, hopefully already you're feeling like, okay, I'm kind of getting my arm moving and feeling the groove of this. All right, once you have done that, we are going to look at this quote here. So I chose this quote from Laura Ingalls Wilder. Some old-fashioned things like fresh air and sunshine are hard to beat in our mad rush for progress and modern improvements. Let's be sure we take along with us all the things worthwhile. One of those being cursive. So we don't have time today to teach, of course, the entire alphabet, but this quote here will give you a good idea of most of the alphabet. I'm going to grab a colored pen here and teach you about the guidelines. So this space here, where this square is your X height. That is where the majority of your lowercase letters, or like the letter X, would fit. Let's see, does that blue show up okay? That's where the majority of your lowercase letters or the lowercase x would fit in that space. We call that your X height. We call this line here that they're all sitting on the baseline. The very top is your ascender line, because these tall loops are called ascenders. And then these lower loops are called descenders. So this bottom line is called a descender line. This is a little intense if you haven't studied this at all, but I'm just giving you a brief overview of how it can help you. And then this dotted line, I call the DTPQ line. So if you look here, this D stops. It doesn't go all the way to the top. A T stops. It doesn't go all the way to the top. A P stops. It doesn't go all the way to the bottom. And a Q, I bet I don't have a Q in here, but a Q is another letter that will stop halfway. It doesn't go all the way to the bottom. So a DTPQ line. And then additionally, that line is where numbers sit. So numbers don't go all the way to the top, and they don't sit in the X height. They're kind of 1.5. So they also sit in that space. It looked a little different than our typical kindergarten lines, and these are actually really large. It's a little bit harder to write at this 1/4 inch, but I did it at this scale so that you could look and kind of decode what's going on here. And then we're going to try writing it for yourself on the 1/8 inch guide sheet. So capitals are going to go the full height. This is a capital S. And then we've got lowercase O-M-E. I'm just going to kind of go through this here. The D stops at that half line. The F takes up the full space. So that's one. If you're tracing over this with me, you can kind of feel how tall that is. It's not natural to go that large, which if you look at this modern day exemplar, you can see how huge, like that's even larger than the space I have here. And it's really hard to write that big. So I don't recommend it. Okay, I'm just going to trace along this and give you some tips along the way. The H is going to fill up the whole space. And then again, the D only goes halfway. So go ahead and trace over this large one. It's going to be kind of tricky, but then we'll shift down to the smaller lines. Okay, so I just showed you how you could trace that. Let's switch over to this 1/8 guide sheet. That's going to be pretty much your standard. A 1/4 inch ruled lines is going to be kind of like a notebook size. So I like to get to where we're using the 1/8 guide sheet. But if you're just starting out, or if you're a young child, the 1/4 inch is good because you can really practice every stroke within the letter and see what's going on before you shrink it down. Okay, so I'm going to move over to my blank guide sheet. If you want to keep the other one handy to kind of see the letter shapes, you can do that. Again, I'm using this fountain pen just so the blue shows up nice for you guys on the camera. Let me check our time here. Okay, we're good. And I can do kind of like this to get my arm flowing. I should maybe zoom in here. The camera is blocking my view a little bit, so this is not perfect, but I want to demonstrate it for you. So if you're just joining in, we are on the 1/8 guide sheet. We are copying the quote over to the blank guide sheet, and we've done some warm-ups and some cross drills just to get our hand moving. And like I said, we can't teach the whole alphabet in an hour, but this will give you some tips to get started. So the slant line is there. If you've never used slant lines, when you pull your hand down is kind of when you should be following that slant. So I'm going over curve. Let me come over here by this slant line. I'm going to go up for the H, and then I'm going to follow the slant line down. So you can see how it comes down. That's going to give you the consistency in your cursive. If you're out there following along, I mentioned in the beginning about ballpoint pens. The ball tip can be sometimes too thick that it kind of muddles up our smaller letters like this. This is a fountain pen, so the point is really fine. If you're looking for a fountain pen, I just look for an extra fine tip or extra fine nib so that you're not getting ink filled in your whole space. Otherwise, it'll just kind of puddle up if you've got too thick of a nib. And cursive is meant to be a little bit faster, right? That's kind of the purpose of doing cursive. But the nice thing is that in today's world, our jobs and livelihood don't depend on how fast we write. Way 100 years ago, when Palmer developed this method, he developed it because he needed something quicker than calligraphy. And so it's often referred to as business writing because they would hire you in their businesses. I think there's an example here in the back of like some ledgers. Insurance companies, that type of thing, they would hire you based on how quickly you could write and how well your penmanship was also. So it had to look nice and you had to do it quickly. In today's world, our jobs don't really require all that. It requires typing fast. So it's not as much as of a push to write quickly as it is just to be more consistent so that your penmanship is consistent and legible and nice. So there's a little tidbit for you. The Palmer method was born after Spencerian. If you're familiar with calligraphy at all, the Spencerian script is what was widely taught in schools in the late 1800s. And then, as I mentioned, Palmer, he wanted something that was quicker and didn't have the shading. It's all monoline. Oops, I'm off camera here. Be sure we take, I'm trying to reach my hand around the camera so it's a little wobblier than I would like, but I was saying Palmer, he wanted something that was quicker, that they could teach in schools and for business purposes. So you'll sometimes refer or hear it referred to as the business penmanship. Things. Okay, I really stretched my arm out here to get this for you, but hopefully you tried it out. Try the quote. That gives you at least a lot of the letters of the alphabet. And if you've learned cursive, they're going to be similar. There just may be some varieties of the letters. And there is varieties within each person that taught their own method. Okay, so there's a quote on the 1/4-inch guide sheet. Again, the capitals will fill from the baseline to the top ascender line. Or if you're looking at a blank sheet, your capital letters would fill up the whole space like a notebook. And then your lowercase letters are going to be half. And then your DT and PQ letters are almost like 3/4, a little over half. You can see that there. Capital. So if you're on a notebook page, your capital letters fill up the whole space from the baseline. Okay, you check if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And then I did have a few questions come in through email and stuff. So if you're finishing that quote, that is no problem at all. I am going to grab, I need to get a larger guide sheet. I'm just going to demonstrate some words for you. Here we go. I'm going to do the 1/4 inch just so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to grab the Palmer method here so you can see the exemplar from 100 years ago. I just love it. I love collecting these old books. And we'll just do a couple words. So here are those cross drills that you see that I taught you about, those kind of chains of letters. They'll help you create the consistency. And then here you can see that they did them across and then horizontal and vertical. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is show you a couple words and then I'm going to show you a couple variations that you don't see at all in today's penmanship. And some of the words I had were some, where did it go? I'm going to do all lowercase. Let me bring this in a little bit. Follow this slant line down. I just forgot how to spell it. Hullabaloo. There was a fun list that had like all these best words in history. Hullabaloo. We're going to do fuddy-duddy. So F is one of the harder ones because it goes clear to the top, clear to the bottom. Let's do a capital lollygag. See this 1/4 inch is really hard for me to get my whole hand clear to the top. So you can see that L didn't make it clear up there because it is so large. But like I said, if you have children or you've never learned cursive, this is where we'll start to really break down every single letter and how it should be formed before we shrink down to the smaller size. Gag, and then let's do another capital. There's a K. And then let's do one more. All right, so those are just some fun words to practice. And then I do want to show you some alternative forms of letters. Let's grab this one. Let's go with the F. So I think pretty common cursive F would be this shape and then the crescent back. I feel like that's pretty common. Way back in Palmer's day, they also did a shape that looked like this. So some of you may know it. And that is the capital F from a long time ago. So it's kind of fun to know those differences, especially if you're trying to read documents. That's almost as important as writing in cursive, is being able to read them. So sometimes this will show up and look like a J, and we don't have any clue what it is, but really it was a capital F way back when. Another one is the T. It's often written like that, F. There's the T, but some of our past penmen would do it like this. And I actually have been using this style more. But again, when you're deciphering old documents or reading old documents, which again is just as important, it's nice to know these different alternatives. Some that are less popular that you might not know about are the R. So if I was writing, let's see, if I was writing, what's an R word? Fire. Oops, I started out in the wrong line. I think that's kind of our common R that we're aware of in cursive. But there's also a running R. And it's going to look like that. You may have seen that. But students will often mistake it for a V, especially if they're reading Again, documents, where that might be determined to say 5 rather than fire, but that is a historical running R. And then another one that I love is at the end of the word. If I am writing, let's see, what ends with a T? Best, I'm going to write best. That crossbar is what we are used to, but there is something called a running T. It's just meant to smooth things up and speed things up. It looks like this. It looks kind of wonky, but that is historically at the end of words, the letter T. Okay, so there's a couple things you can practice. I'm going to show you, I want to show you a couple that are always tricky ones that I always get questioned about. And that is the X. So we'll go with Palmer's method of X. And it is a loop stem or curved stem and then an upside down. Capital X is one that we use the least of, but I think that's probably why we get the most questions about it, because we use it the least. Let's see, another one that I get asked about a lot is the G, which is one of my favorite to write. But that is Palmer's version of a G, capital G. And again, I believe just as important as writing them is reading them. So it's nice to know these different versions. And as I teach in my course, we'll go through the basic methods, basic letters. And then I'll go back and show some of these alternatives for the students so that they can appropriately like decipher historical documents. Okay, and then the Q will often show up like this, which looks a lot like the letter 2. But if we kind of go back to how everything is built of ovals, I'll kind of show you how. See that oval shape there? So if we know that everything is built of ovals, then suddenly we can see how our Q has morphed into what it is today. So way back when it started like this. Whoops, that's really bumpy. And today, we do something that's more like this. So just some fun things to know there. Okay, I'm going to go back to this empty spot down here. I mentioned letters, but we have a little bit of time, or sorry, numbers, but we have a bit of time left. I can share some more about numbers. And as I mentioned, they will sit on the DTPQ line or the 1.5 mark. So this is considered 1, and then this will be a half. So your numbers will sit on that dotted line. So if I were to write a date out, let's see, today's date is, let's go right here. June. I'm going to set my numbers right on that dotted line. June 26th. I think it's the 26th, hopefully. (2024), and that's very large, but that's proportionate. So they're not full capital size and they're not completely lowercase, they're in between. All right, so we are going to go back to this page here, I'm going to have you actually add the date to it and write your sentence one more time. This is my best cursive. So knowing what you know now, hopefully within the last 45 minutes, you've been able to learn a few tips that will help, and you can slow down just enough and write your best cursive. And then I'm going to add the date. Okay, if you have any questions, I can answer questions at this time. Otherwise, I'm going to show you one last thing about, make sure there's nothing in the chat here. I'm going to show you one last thing about moving your paper and why it's so important. You'll notice that this cursive camp page, where we were just kind of doing some samples, hopefully, like I said, you can see just as your hand gets warmed up, even just with that little bit of time, your letters were smoother. Your lines can be smoother, but this didn't have any guidelines on it. So if we were to grab a sheet of paper, that's our ultimate goal, right? Is to be able to have smooth penmanship across the page. I can write on any paper that I want and create legible, consistent lettering, handwriting. And this is where I reinforce to all my students about moving your paper. And while I was filming for the course, I'll show you, let me find a blank sheet here. I'll show you how important it is to move your paper. So if I lift my hands above my head and I bring them down, that's going to show me my optimal zone. So right here is my optimal zone of writing. Grab this, you can't see it again. And right here is my optimal writing zone. So once I go outside of there, I need to move my sheet so that it stays within. And as I was filming, I noticed how important this is, because you'll get a lot of questions about, well, you can keep such a straight line in your writing. My lines start to curve, and that's because we're not moving our paper. So if I start writing, let's see, this is my cursive, and then I'm just going to shift my paper. I'm writing that to click, but that's a pretty straight line. I like to say I'm pretty straight. Now, if I'm going to keep this here, I'm not going to shift my paper at all. So I'm starting right here in this optimal zone. This is, and my fingers are really stretching. So that means that naturally it's going to go downhill because my fingers are stretching so far. So you can see that it kind of starts to curve that direction. So that's one of the key things that I will remind students all the time, is to shift your paper. It's one of the big like aha moments I had was, okay, we have these notebooks that we're always writing in, we're going up and down, and it's no wonder we can't stay straight, because we're bending our wrists like this, rather than moving the notebook to keep our pen in this optimal zone. Okay, I could talk about cursive for a really long time. Hopefully I haven't bored you. Hopefully you've learned something new. If you're interested in cursive handwriting, my course will be releasing, hopefully, well, it's in the works now, but for sure by August. I don't have an official release date yet. But again, if you're just tuning in, I will be teaching methods that are from 100 years ago. And let me show you. Actually, 100 years ago, here's another one. They started, this is grade 2, but they actually started in grade 1. And if you think about back then, they had the one-room schoolhouses. And I'm a homeschool mom, so we're all in the same room. But from 1st to 8th grade, they were all doing the same handwriting lessons. There was a book for each student. And they all did the same penmanship. Now, when you go from one teacher to the next, their penmanship might be different. You go from one school to the next, there's no consistency. So it gets really confusing. But they did start clear back in grade 1, or like 7 years old, 6 years old, is what the Palmer method started at. So anyways, I have enjoyed teaching you. Thanks for joining in today. I will be sharing more tips and tricks and downloads on the email list, where you should have gotten the link for this. And you can always message me for questions. Otherwise, just stay tuned and I will be releasing more sources for you to keep practicing. Okay, guys, I'll hang out here for just a minute if anyone has questions. But yeah, thanks for joining in if you were live, and thanks for catching the replay. You can watch this over and use the downloads as much as you would like. And then I'll keep sending out more practice pages for you so you can continue to improve your cursive handwriting. Thanks so much, guys.